It's no secret that the global perception of the US and the UK has turned sour in the last decade. It's become a bit of a trend to criticize the US and bash the UK. There is growing global resentment towards the US, and in the UK there is internal lack of trust in the government. Now that social media has so much influence on the culture, it's difficult to determine if negative stories around the US are gaining traction because people see that they are gaining traction and so create more and more content to try and ride the wave to notoriety, or if this is actually a trend which is happening offline in real life. Well, an opinion poll conducted by Gallup found that public opinion has shifted dramatically in the last 2 decades. Back in 2006, the US and the UK were the top dogs among the G7 nations. When Gallup first measured national confidence in government around the world almost 2 decades ago, President George W. Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair were well into their terms of office, and both of them retained extensive confidence domestically, far more than almost all the other G7 nations. This is very surprising for me because I remember the war drum that Tony Blair whipped up regarding WMDs and Saddam Hussein, and the decision to go to war was very much against the British public. In fact, in 2003, London saw the largest marches ever recorded, with almost 1 million people marching on the streets in protest against this invasion, and it was very important for us at the time, for us the people, to let the world know that this decision was taken solely by the British government. It was not sanctioned by the British people. And yet, according to this poll, just a few years later, the UK government managed to sway public opinion right back into their favour. George W. Bush was also one of those presidents which was constantly ridiculed, at least outside of the US. He was always mumbling and fumbling over his words. But perhaps he just had a big base of support domestically. However hard it is to believe this, the situation looks very different today. In 2022, when Gallup conducted their latest study, these results have been essentially flipped on their head. Only 1 in 3 adults in both the US and the UK say they have confidence in their government. And in fact, this is so low that they've gone from the very top of the G7 nations to the very bottom in under 2 decades. This downward trend only seems to be continuing, as another study carried out by the Policy Institute at King's College London went beyond politics and looked at other institutions such as the media. Out of 24 countries, only Egypt had lower levels of confidence in the press. In the UK, it was 24%. And actually, only 5% of Gen Z said that they had confidence in the press. 5%, that is historic levels of distrust. And in fact, research from the Office of National Statistics found that this seems to be spiraling out of control, with research from 2023 showing that only 27% of UK adults had confidence in their government. So 33% in 2022, 27% in 2023. What is going to be like in 2024? I dread to think, although it looks like we might find out very soon. Interestingly, while perceptions of domestic political institutions are increasingly negative, Britain's view of the EU is increasingly positive, to the extent that the UK public are far more likely to have confidence in the EU than in Parliament or in any other political institutions in the UK. And what is most interesting is that this is not restricted to young people. These positive views of the EU are actually increasing among all generations, including older cohorts. So let's just take a step back here. First of all, why has confidence tanked so drastically in the US and the UK? Why is confidence seemingly increasing in the EU? And most importantly, how has Germany managed to go from the very bottom of confidence levels to the very top in less than 2 decades? Well, about a year ago, I made this video here. I'll link it somewhere on the screen, where I discussed just how strong levels of trust are in Germany, and specifically levels of trust in the government, in the police, the media, this kind of thing. And it seemed to strike a chord because it's my most viewed video on the channel, and many of you disagreed vehemently. And basically, it was mostly from Germans saying how bad the situation in Germany is, that levels of trust have deteriorated massively, and the usual arguments were thrown around. It's because of immigration, Immigrants coming into the country have changed the fabric of German society, and because of this, levels of trust have just completely tanked. But back in 2006, when Gallup first started doing these polls, levels of trust in Germany were at abysmal levels. They were at the levels that they currently are in the UK and the US, around 30% trust in government. This was in 2006, before the whole migrant crisis of 2015. So what is going on? Because Germans have gone from the very bottom of this table up to the very top. And actually today, around 60, if not over 60% of Germans say that they have trust in their government. So is this surprising to you? I mean, it's not surprising to me, but based on the comments of that video I did a year ago, I think that many of you will disagree with the statement that trust in German political institutions is very high. So the question is why? Why is it so high in Germany at the moment? Could it just be that Germans are more docile, more trusting? Could it just be the collectivist culture, that things like social cohesion are seen as much more important than individual equality for Germans? Or maybe it could be, anti-government protests are not really a thing in Germany. It's not really a part of the culture, not like it is in the UK or France, for example. It could be changing. There have been the protests from the farmers and Futures for Fridays and all that kind of stuff. But the overarching atmosphere is just very different in Germany. If there are protests or marches, people are usually very well behaved. It's very it's very erwachsen. It's very mature, and people, do their thing without causing much trouble. It's not like in France, where if the government makes a decision that the people do not agree with, there's literally war on the street. That kind of culture is not really manifested in Germany. That could be part of it, but I think really the reason is not German passivity, but really just the fact that the UK and the US have many more reasons to distrust their own governments. We already talked about social mobility in the UK here in this video, and there are increasing reports coming out of the US about social inequality, increased homelessness. But aside from a very challenging economic situation, I think it's safe to say that politics in both countries has just been an absolute shambles in the last 5 years. I don't think we need to talk about Partygate or the fact that the UK has had 4 prime ministers since 2019, which might be normal for some countries, but that is highly unusual for the UK, and it's been a very turbulent time in terms of politics. It also seems that extroverted leaders like Boris and Trump, while maybe having a strong fan base in their own countries domestically, have really done more damage on a global scale, to the image and the perception of the country than was previously thought. Research by Gallup found that for countries across the globe, leadership approval and confidence in government highly correlate. So I think it's safe to say that confidence in government really depends on the leader in office, who is the person with the power, who is the face of the government. And while sort of very brash and overconfident personality types are great for getting attention and for viral campaigns, it just seems that they do not fill the general population with confidence in their ability to run the country. And the leadership changes in the last couple of years in both the US and the UK just don't seem to have made any difference. The damage has been done. So should we be surprised? Are you surprised by these figures? Is this something new? Or is this just confirming what you already suspected? I think the real question we need to ask is how low does confidence actually need to go before something changes? 27% confidence in the UK, 31% confidence in the US. What happens when that goes down to 15 or 10 or 5%? Well, it looks like we might find out in 2024. With such abysmally low levels of confidence, UK and US politicians have an uphill battle to really try and turn the tables around. But is this all futile? Is it just too late? Should we be questioning the political system entirely? Should we be preparing for a post-government world? Should we abdicate our responsibility to AI and the alien? Okay, maybe that's a little overdramatic. Let's just take a step back. Take a deep breath and pause. Maybe the situation really is not that bad after all. If we just look at Germany, for instance, in 2006, they were pretty much in the same position. The levels of confidence in government in 2006 were at 32% in Germany, and they are now at 61%, or they were in 2022. And this is quite surprising, considering all the challenges that Germany has gone through, the migrant crisis, the political change, going from Angela Merkel, who finally gave up the reins of power, to somebody new who's not really been tested yet. It is quite surprising that confidence in government is still so high. So maybe all that's needed in the UK and the US is just a little more reservation, a little less rock star antics, and just more focus on the actual job at hand. So what's your take? Do you think this research is accurate? Do you trust your government? Do you believe in the media or the legal system? Or do you disagree with the results of this survey? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. This is all just food for thought. Don't take it too seriously, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day. That's it for now. Take care. Bye-bye.